The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. From hot dogs to cool kitties, this is Darkside of the Pooch.
Darkside of the Pooch. He's Dr. Reb, Stewart, Rossbridge Animal Hospital. We do it every single week. We take your emails. We got a ton of them too. info@tonykurreradio.net. info@tonykurreradio.net. No question is too goofy, too stupid. We'll get to it, so check it out. He is Dr. Reb Stewart. And before we start here, I just wanted to thank you, and I put out some social media thanking you personally for helping out a neighbor of mine. You're so compassionate and so good at what you do, and I do want to talk about it. We've talked about dogs dying. It's a very difficult situation, particularly when you have to put an animal down. And you helped out a neighbor of mine this past weekend, and I love you for it, and I really appreciate it. And I always say that God gives by taking away, and that dog's in heaven. 14-year-old. What kind of dog was Dusty?
I mean, he was, probably lab mix.
Yeah.
Of some kind.
He was blind. He had all kinds of issues, but that dog's in a much happier place. So kind of walk me through what exactly happens when someone brings in an animal. Just give me, what are the signs you're looking for? I know a lot of people, and I love you for this because you've done two of my dogs where I'm like, okay, if this was your dog, what would you do? And I know some vets will say, well, I really don't want to have to say blah, 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 but you'll pretty much tell it like it is. But how do you kind of know when it's time to let a dog go?
It really starts with if you have either been able to diagnose the main problem, or you've exhausted all your options, and you either have run the test to try to figure out what's going on, and it's going to take some more advanced diagnostics like CTs or an MRI or a surgery or something that's just sometimes it just doesn't make sense to do, so if you've exhausted all options or you just can't find the answer, then when it gets to a point where they're either not eating or they're unable to get up on their own or they're unable to urinate or defecate, if they meet any of those three requirements, then it's time to put them down. It's a hard thing to do from an owner standpoint. From a veterinarian standpoint, it's hard for us to do too, but the way that I try to think about it is that it is it's a treatment. It's a form of treatment. And, there are people that'll say that, and it's, a little bit tongue in cheek that, it's the only treatment that's 100% effective 100% of the time, but it's true. Part of what we do is we, alleviate pain and suffering. And it's always a hard thing to do for the owner. Sometimes it's harder than other times, and it depends on the situation with the pet and the disease that it has and the symptoms that it has. And, it depends on the owner and how close they are to the pet. There's some people that for them, having a pet is another member of the family. And there are some people that their pet is, it's kind of a, not another mouth to feed, but it's property. It's something that they just kind of have. And that's okay. Their pets are different things to different people. So it's always a difficult decision. But people, if you can look at it from a standpoint of I'm helping my pet, I'm doing what is best for my pet right now, then it helps with the sadness and maybe sometimes the guilt.
Yeah. I have to ask you this question because I know you're Christian. Do you say a prayer before you put an animal down?
Yeah. And it's something that I started doing because I was fortunate to work at a practice where, having faith in Christ was something that was open. The owners of that practice were open in their faith, and I got that from them. And I've only had one person in, close to 15 years that has said, I would prefer if you didn't do that. And
really? Wow.
Everyone else has, I've always always kind of say, hey, this is kind of the time where we say a prayer. Is that okay with you?
Was that dog's name Cujo or?
Yeah. And I don't do it every time, like I don't do it every time, because sometimes the situation, like for example, if we do have some young people in the room, and they, are kind of, vocal or, play in and run. And like, I kind of read the room.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I do every time, but the vast majority of the time, it is something that I ask the owner if they would like to do. But like I said, I've only had one that said no. And I don't know what the reason was.
Yeah.
Some people, and there are some people, like I said, you got to read the room. Some people are just absolutely hysterical. They are.
Yeah.
And they need it done, and they need it done as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
And when it's like that, you just explain to them what's going to happen, how it's going to go, and you just do it. Because if you don't, it's agonizing for that owner. They need closure, they need it done, and then they need to get out of there.
At Rossbridge Vet, of course, on Facebook, as well as your website, 208-0301. I called 205-208-0301. I got me some heart medicine. I got me some flea and tick stuff for a scruffy dog in the old Frisco and Rainer. And then, of course, I also got them boarded. They're going to be taking my dogs to your place this coming Saturday for a week. So I'm super excited about my dogs having their own little vacation. And I have an interesting email question about just that coming up in just a few seconds. Before we close the door on this, and by the way, you can hear the show at least 5 days a week on the TKR app. Fantastic show. I believe it airs at noon every Monday through Friday. And, of course, wherever you get your podcast. And we have just cleaned things up to TKR. All you have to remember, there's 3 letters, TKR on Android, Apple. Download our app like 100,000 folks already have. So shortly after that family next door got home, after putting Dusty down, I saw my neighbor with a shovel coming up from the backyard, and I'm assuming that was because he buried his own dog. What happens to the animal once he is put down at your office? Do you dispose of it? Are they allowed to take it with them? How's that work?
They can take it with them, or they can leave it with us. And if they leave it with us, it's going to get cremated.
Okay.
And if it gets cremated, the owner can elect sometimes, to get the ashes returned, should they want to, and if that service is available. So, there are some areas of town that, it's technically against city ordinances
Yes.
to bury a pet.
Yes.
So I don't, a lot of these people, they're taking their pets, maybe have a farm or live on the lake, have a second home somewhere. So we just do as we're told. If they say, hey, I want to take my pet with me, I've got a place I'm going to bury it, then off it goes.
Yeah,
it goes with them.
You mentioned that a lot of people, and I've gotten a little closer to this. It's always been an animal to me. I love my dogs. I've had dogs my entire life. Ever since I was born, I've always had a dog in my house. But they are animals, and I look at them as somewhat serviceable to me, and I take care of them, and no more so now than the 2 dogs I got right now, because I went through a divorce, and these animals were here for me, and I really appreciate them being there for one of the toughest parts of my life. But a Pew Research article just came out yesterday, which has some unbelievable numbers. 97% of all people who own a cat or dog say that the animal's part of their family, which is not surprising. But 57% said the dog in their family was just as important as a human life. Your thoughts on that? It's hard to believe that someone would actually believe that their dog is as important as their brother, sister, mother, or father. But I guess that's how people feel about their pets. That's great.
So, I'm gonna look at this through maybe a different lens.
Okay.
So if someone tells me that their pet is as important as a family member, I'm going to ask them this question. All right, the apocalypse has come. You and your family and your furry friend are all huddled into your boarded up house with no electricity, and you just ran out of food.
Yes.
Who you eating first?
Exactly.
Because it's not grandma and it's not my firstborn son. Yeah. It's going to be my dog. Yeah. So I get it and I love it and I support it 100%. And my dog is a part of my family. He is. I'm telling you, my dog gets away with stuff in my house that I could never get away with. Dog pees and poops in the house, no problem. Yeah. My wife, whatever, no problem, Renzo, we'll take care of it. tears something up, and I'm huffing and puffing, my wife's like, it's not that big a deal. We can replace it. Yeah, it's our kid's first baby rattle, like whatever.
Yeah.
So, at our house, the dog in a lot of cases is held in a higher esteem than dad is. But I can also promise you that if that scenario comes up, I hopefully they're not, putting me over the fire.
Yeah.
At first.
What would be funny is if they did, they'd probably bury you on the backyard and your dog would be the one that would find you. So there you
No, he
go.
would pee on me. He would pee right on the ground that I was underneath. He'd poop too, maybe even throw up for good measure.
He is Dr. Reb Stewart, Rossbridge Animal Hospital. He owns a joint. It's fantastic. I'm going to have my dogs boarded here coming up next week. And Stacy in Rossbridge wants to know, is it okay to bring dog toys and dog blankets so they can be as comfortable as possible if they board at most veterinarian places like Rossbridge Animal Hospital? Yes or no?
So we have a very unpopular policy.
Oh, no, really?
We have a very unpopular policy at my place, where we, unless, there have been times where we've had, very old animals that need lots of bedding, because they spend a lot of time laying down and they're old and they're creaky and they just, they need special treatment. And so we have we put a lot of towels and blankets and stuff in there for support. But for most dogs and cats, we just don't like for that stuff to be brought from home because, when you go on a trip and you have to spend a lot of time in a hotel room,
yeah,
at least for me, the first thing that sets in is boredom.
Yeah.
And when I get bored, I do things I wouldn't typically do. I will read a terrible book.
Yeah.
I will pace the halls. I will call people that I haven't talked to in years because I'm bored.
Yeah.
And dogs are the same way. They're not in their home. They're not with the people that they're used to seeing. And they sit, in this other place and they're bored. And they will lick themselves, they will chew on themselves, but they will also eat things that they shouldn't eat.
Oh.
And if they eat a blanket, they tear up the toy, they eat the toy, then they have a GI obstruction. And a lot of cases that requires surgery. So it's, our job is to...
Did you actually have that happen? Is that why that's a policy of yours, or is that just something you just...
I've seen it happen. Now, fortunately, I have not... this is not a policy that we started with.
Yeah.
It's a policy that we developed. Now, the dog didn't obstruct, but it tore up and ate a whole towel. And for, 2 days, I was crossing my fingers that all that towel came out, which it did.
Yeah.
But it was just, it's something that, we, our job is to promote pet health, wellness, and health and comfort and wellness. That's our, that's right there. That's our motto. And, if we're not doing that, that goes against what our core values are.
So that sounds like that's like a self wiper. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's why we don't do it, but it is an unpopular opinion, but we're focused on the health and the well-being and the comfort of the pet. And that, that can throw a wrench into it.
So if money was no object, not to say you're expensive, you're not, but if money was no object and I wanted undivided attention for my dog for 7 straight days, could you do it? Or what I know you have things like, do you want to take your dogs for a walk once or twice a day? Or do you want people to play with your animal once or twice a day? What kind of stuff do you offer?
We have a doggy daycare, so they're outside with our staff, a staff member that watches them and plays with them, and they can either do a full day of that or they can do a half day. So they don't. It's not constant one-on-one interaction. They're interacting with other dogs and they're interacting with staff. And there are some dogs that works great for. They're good in social settings and they like to be played with by a human. And there's some dogs that aren't. Yeah. There are some dogs that are not good, with other dogs. So we have to pick and choose the pets that are, socialized and they have a good time and they, don't get put in timeout. But if the dog's well socialized, it's got to be spayed and neutered. And after that, you can go out there and, run around, have a good time.
What would it cost me to have Dr. Rab explicitly give my dog belly rubs at noon, 2, and 4, Monday through Friday?
Well, I think I could probably go back there and do that pro bono.
Yeah, you probably could. He's Dr. Rab Stewart, Rossburg Animal Hospital. One of my favorite shows, Darkside, the Pooch. You can hear it 5 days a week here in the TKR app, now available on Android and Apple. Just TKR. You don't have to spell out Tony Curry Radio. But you do if you're looking for our podcast, TKR Podcast or Tony Curry Radio Podcast, one of our favorite shows. And by far, the show that gets the most emails for sure. info@TonyCurryRadio.net. Pete in Fort Worth, Texas. It's stinking hot everywhere, by the way. He wants to know, and I read these ahead of time. He's got, and I've had the same instance. He has a dog that he's had for 6 years. He has a baby, and now the dog won't stop growling at the baby on the floor, and he is wigging out. He said it's the sweetest dog he's ever had. He doesn't know why the dog is growling at it. The dog does not understand. And so he's starting to pen the dog up, and now the dog's getting angry with him because he's changing his routine for this kid, and so now he's afraid to even have this dog near his child. What can you do to train this dog?
Be very, very careful. And, it's a very scary situation. And I've had, it hasn't happened often, but I've had people call me that are just kind of really at the end of their rope because they've had a child be bitten by their, family dog, not once and not twice, but, sometimes 3 times.
Wow.
And
what typically happens there? Because as a parent, we always say, watch the dog because if he bites you, we're going to have to put him down. What typically happens then?
Well, it's really up to the owner of the dog.
Yeah,
because
if they get rid of the animal, they take it to a pound, I guess, but you have to tell them, right? Isn't there a 10-day rule where people, pounds will not take dogs.
You have to, because the fear is that maybe they're rabid. So you can't, any dog that has bitten another person is, you can't euthanize them. You're supposed to monitor them for 10 days. Now, but the other thing is that if you, it doesn't mean you can't euthanize them, but it just means if you euthanize them, you need to test the brain for rabies. Yeah. So you're, and which is, that's it's a legitimate concern and things that people have done. If there's concern that the dog's rabid, then it's euthanized and the brain is sent off for testing. That's the only way that rabies can be tested for. It's a post-mortem diagnosis. It cannot be diagnosed ante-mortem, meaning while they're still alive. So, but you just have to be very careful. You can take proper precautions and be sure that the baby or child is not with the dog unsupervised and that they maintain their distance. You can get a trainer involved, but it's very hard, if not impossible, to replicate the scenario that happens at home with the child. Because, a trainer, a trainer may not have access to a child. And plus we don't want to use a kid as bait at a dog trainer.
Typically,
that's just not what
and I know you're not
I
know you're not a dog trainer. In my particular case, I had a wire fox terrier and he was having seizures and I was not aware of it. And I just, I thought brute force was going to change this dog's behavior and it made it worse. Typically, what does a trainer do if a dog is growling at a child and outside just keeping them separated? How do you just have to reintroduce themselves, I guess, with a leash and just go slowly? Is that how they do it?
Well, no, that's what I'm saying is I wouldn't even feel comfortable doing that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't, and I don't know the answer to that. And I don't know if there's a trainer. Certainly the trainer that we recommend, I don't think that's something that he would want to, mess around with. I think that's just too much liability. So, I think that if the child is, and the dog and child are really at odds and you're really fearful that something's going to happen, if it were me, I would probably get in touch with a behaviorist. And these are people that they did a residency in behavior. So you can think of it as a psychiatrist for dogs, literally. Mm-hmm. I would do that. Or, I hate to say this, but if it's me, I'm not going to keep that dog around. I'm just not. And let me go back. I had a Weimaraner for 12 years. And this is, way before I had kids, before I got married. And so that dog was, still around when we had our first child. And our son would kind of go close to the dog, and her name was Callie. And, Callie didn't like it. She would kind of growl at him, turn and bark, and stand up and run away, And so we saw this happen a few times. And, with me having so much experience with pets and especially my own pet, I knew that the bark and the growl, it was just a warning. And I didn't ever think that she was going to bite my son. And she never did. Yeah. Because she would always just kind of bark, like growl, bark, jump up and run away. Yeah. She was just like, leave me alone. I don't want to be here. But, I don't know other people's dogs. And I'd be very, very cautious because the last thing that you want is that dog to cause permanent damage or, even worse.
Yeah, it's surprising to me how many people get bitten and they keep the animal. I just because once a dog bites me, I'm done. I mean, because once that box is opened, you're allowing it to stay around. I don't know. And dogs, and normally it's not the dog's fault. I mean, 9 out of 10 times it's not. info@TonyCurryRadio.net. More emails. We'll get to those mutt mail here in just a second. Again, 205-208-0301. Call for boarding, any of your vet care stuff. He is the best. He does wonderful work, Dr. Rab Stewart. And of course, you can also find him on the Rabbit right there on Twitter, as well as Ross Bridge Vet on Twitter as well. Live in Tannehill State Park. I don't know if she lives there or she's visiting. She goes, what's the most misunderstood fact about cats?
Oh, man.
Well, what about the thing you sent me last week? The reaction that was kind of cool. Yeah, I just remember that. Talk about that.
I don't know what probably as far as the most misunderstanding thing about cats. I think that I want to get to what you talked about, but I think cats get a bad rap for maybe like not being intelligent, and they are incredibly intelligent. In some ways, I think they're smarter than dogs. But the interesting thing that I sent you the other day is that cats have a faster reaction time than snakes. I think it was 40 to it was 30 to 70 milliseconds is the reaction time for the average cat.
It's crazy.
And snakes is 40 to 80 milliseconds. But that video that I sent you just proves it. The snake was trying to strike this cat, and the cat just, moves away and knocks that snake right in the head like it was, Muhammad Ali. It was incredible.
No, it was cool. And humans are what, like 250 or something? It's not even close.
I'm telling you, like, that's why when a mean cat comes in, I call them snakes because that is how fast they can strike. They can bite you and scratch you faster than you can blink. They're fast.
Have you ever had the cat claws come at you through the sweater? You're holding a cat and it just comes at you. You think it's fine. All of a sudden it's dug into you.
I can usually see the warning signs, and it's been a long time since I've been bitten by a cat. Scratches are different because sometimes you can only control so many things. So if you got one person that's helping you, the main thing they're supposed to control is the head, because the bites is what will really send you to the hospital. Yeah. So you can, you have one person kind of controlling the body and the head. And then after that, the claws, there's really nobody that can hang on to those. So, getting scratched is a lot more common than getting bit, because it's a lot more important to keep the mouth away.
RossBridgeVet.com is their website. Check it out. Again, their number 208-203-01, 208-208-0301. Rover in Homewood. I'm hoping this is his real name because it'd be cool to have a friend named Rover. Is it true that wet noses on dogs mean happy dogs and healthy dogs?
No.
Okay.
It's definitely a wives' tale. People come in and say, well, I don't think there's anything really bad wrong because they have a wet nose, but that doesn't mean anything. And then I have people come in and say, well, my dog's nose is dry and I feel like it's really sick, when, the dog's totally healthy. So, if a dog is really dehydrated, then potentially maybe their nose is really dry, or maybe they just haven't licked it in a while. So you can't really get a whole lot from that.
This is Darkside of the Pooch.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.